Morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It depends on which part of the world you are right now. So I am delighted to welcome you all to today's webinar. And I said where we are going to discuss a very important topic, which is the operationalization or the implementation of the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus. So allow me first to introduce myself before we proceed to the different presentations. My name is Arwa Abdelhai, and I am a professor in the German Jordanian University and coordinator of the WASH Master Program hosted by the university. And I am honored to be your moderator for this session. I would like also to extend my gratitude to all of you for taking the time to join us today. And I think the presence of the different people to such a webinar reflects the importance of this topic for the different humanitarian professionals, and also for your commitment to engaging in such meaningful discussions. I would like also to express my deep appreciation to our distinguished speakers who have generously accepted our invitation to join us today and to share their insights and expertise. And we are fortunate to have 4 speakers today with us. Let me introduce them briefly, and then I will give the floor to everyone to introduce himself or herself. So first of all, we have Dr. Jean Lepeg, Senior Technical Advisor of WASH from Action Against Hunger, ACF. Our second speaker will be Giulia Serena Gagliardini, WASH specialist and whole of Syria WASH cluster coordinator from UNICEF MENA region. And also she will be joined by her colleague Nida Hussein, WASH climate change officer in MENA UNICEF office. And finally, I am happy to have with us also Hiba Abu Rob, Regional WASH Coordinator, Health Disasters, Climate and Crisis HDCC Unit from IFRC. So I think each of our speakers will bring into the discussion valuable experience and knowledge. And I am quite confident that sharing the perspectives will enrich our understanding of this topic today. So just a quick note from on the format from my side. An organizational point. Each speaker will be allocated 20 minutes to present or to share with us, as I said, his or her expertise on this specific topic, and it will be followed by 15 minutes of question and answers. So I encourage all the audience to share their questions in the chat box, and my colleagues will be following up on that, and we will try our best to address as many as possible. Regarding the session, also one final note from my side before we proceed. This session will be recorded, and afterward we will be sharing the link to the recorded session on the different platforms, for sure with Susanna and with the German WASH network. And without further delay, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, Jean Lepeg. And Jean, the floor is all yours right now.
Okay, thanks a lot, Arwa. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen, and in order we follow the presentation, you will tell me as soon as you got that. I guess you can see my screen now. Yes? Okay.
So yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Let me put it in full screen. Thank you very much. So I'm going to speak about first understanding the HDP Nexus, and then giving a perspective of Action Against Hunger, which is a humanitarian NGO, on how we can, as NGOs, implement it. Before starting, I would say that we are not experts in the peace processes, and many NGOs are not. So I will give my humble approach from an NGO working in 56 countries and essentially in conflict areas, but keeping in mind that we are not peace experts. So basically, we will come back on what is the HDP Nexus, so some definitions. What is the connection between action against hunger and the Nexus? We'll go through best practices and case studies. Then we will check the policy and institutional frameworks about facilitating the HDP integration from a WASH perspective, essentially. We'll discuss a little the funding mechanism and the capacity building approaches that can help you to move on board the HDP. And then we'll have the question and actions. So as ROSA, I'm the Senior WASH Advisor for ACF France. ACF France is working in 20 countries, and we are part of an international network of 56 countries. We are a member of the Global WASH Cluster, of several UN task force, and also of the World Water Council. From a sort of advocacy perspective, we are also co-facilitating with UNICEF and the French Water Partnership the WASH Roadmap Advocacy Initiative. And you've got my contact here if you have any questions or if you want to approach me. So first, let's start with a quick introduction on the HDP Nexus. If we look at the JMP 2023, you know that a quarter of the planet doesn't have access to safely managed water, and more or less 45% of the planet doesn't have access about safe sanitation. Those figures are increased massively when we come into a fragile context and conflicts. As you can see, the access to basic drinking water is divided by 4, and the access to sanitation is divided by 2. So we have a sort of overlap here that has been calculated by UNOCHA in 2022, which is called also the double burden, where you have a gap in terms of development, access to basic services, and the issues of fragile, vulnerable contexts. So this overlap is, the HDP Nexus is about how do we work in this overlap. Firstly, if we come back to the transformative agenda, which is a sort of essential element of the humanitarian reform. So the humanitarian reform was back in 2005, and the transformative agenda clarified a little the role and responsibility of the clusters. You can see that the clusters, the 11 humanitarian clusters, including the one on water, sanitation, and hygiene, their mandate is between preparedness and recovery, meaning that the reconstruction and even prevention and mitigation are not part of the humanitarian agenda. And so the HDP Nexus is going to explore these borders between the humanitarian response and the transition to development. Something important to keep in mind is that the concept of continuum, where we believe that you have a humanitarian crisis, then there is a stabilization, and then you move toward development. That was a concept like 20 years ago that have been criticized and changed into a continuum. The continuum means that at the same place, in the same moment, you can be facing a humanitarian issue, and in the meantime, facing also a development, being part of a development agenda. So the figure here, it's a UNDP figure that shows that there is a sort of overlap of those many contexts. And you can see that peace building is embracing either the humanitarian context, but also the development context. So we are in a complex approach when we speak about the HDP, because we are not in one unique context, but we are on an overlap of several contexts. When we look at the concept behind the HDP, there are 3 important points, I think. The first one is that the HDP refers to the integration of humanitarian development and peace-building efforts. So we are going to try to run in the same time, in the same place, but maybe with different actors, those 3 thematics. The second point is that the HDP approach recognizes that objectives are interdependent, meaning that you're not going to be able to sort a humanitarian goal if you don't consider the development and the peace approaches goal. And the third one is we are trying to bridge a gap between humanitarian and development streams. Humanitarian is an exception. The normality is the development. So we try to gap something which is the normality, the development agenda, with something which is alloctone, which is artificial, which is the humanitarian response. And this bridging this gap is going to be seen in the perspective of fostering peace. When we speak about the HDP, there is a P which is about peace. And the P, you can see it in two ways, what we call the big P and the little p. The big P is referring to peace agreements, and it's going to be in the hand of the UN and multilateral actors. So NGOs are not going to touch the big P. The little p is all the actions that are going to facilitate the big P, for example, in improving the social cohesion. And there is the role of the NGOs. So NGOs are going to be essential actors to foster the little p. But just to keep in mind that the big P will never happen if you don't have social cohesion. So the two P's are working together. Then in terms of definition, something pretty important also to remember is that we speak, I mean, it's a UNDP definition, but we speak of negative peace when there is an absence of direct violence, like a ceasefire. And we speak of positive peace when there is a sort of building constructively conflict resolution. And you can see here also that I would say that negative peace is very connected with the big P. It's very UN process, it's very member states process. But the positive peace, there is a room for NGOs and for many actors to foster the positive peace. So just to keep in mind that there are different roles about the HDP and that each of us, as an organization, we can find our place there. When we speak about fragile conflict and violent contexts, we speak about 39, let's say 40 countries. And you can see that within these 40 countries, and it's an OCHA definition, there are 15 which are very high risk. And of course, the map here is about 2024, that I'm sure it could be adapted. And those countries are reflecting more or less the countries where you have activated clusters. Something to keep in mind also is that the PIN, so the people in need, which is a UNOCHA data, is massively increasing till 2012, and that the WASH PIN is 165 million, was last year 165 million, which is half of the PIN. So if you look at the people in need, the 340 million people in need, half of them are in need of WASH. So WASH is essential in conflict areas, in fragile conflict and violent contexts, and that's why it's very opportunistic to discuss about the HDP together now. We keep in mind also that the forcibly displaced people number, the last one from last year, is 114 million, because those people are going also to have an important part in the HDP perception. So why is Action Against Hunger interested by the HDP? And when I say Action Against Hunger, it's just reflecting maybe other NGOs that are around the table. First, we are working in 56 countries, and you can see that on the 15 very high-risk countries identified by UNOCHA as FCV context, ACF is part of 12 of them. And then on the high risk, we are part of 17 of the 24. So geographically, there is a logic that we're involved in the HDP. Second thing is our programmatic approach. Here you can see on the right a table that shows the percentage of projects that we have in humanitarian context, in transition, and in development. And you can see that well, it's what we call the PNUD problem. You can see that we have less programs in transition than in humanitarian or in development. First, because the mandate of ACF is very humanitarian, and also because it's extremely difficult to be funded in transition. And I think this is also something to keep in mind, and you can see that it applies also to the MENA region. So MENA region, we work, for example, in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Palestine. And here also, the transition context is the most difficult to work in because it's the less funded also. And I know that we have colleagues from GIZ around the table and from the cluster, but this is something we have less actors, we have less fund, and there is less interest. So there is a big debate about who owns the transition context. Well, obviously, it should be the development who hosts it. And but again, the role and responsibilities are not so clear. So we are working when we speak about HDP in a context where nothing is extremely clear and it's usually poorly funded. If we look at our WASH strategy, we can see that in ACF there is a big part about the preparedness and a big part about the recovery. So I'm not going to go into detail of that, but just to let you know that if you decide to work in HDP context, those two blocks, the preparedness and the recovery, which are touching the transition somewhere before and after the crisis, you will need really to define how you can build your strategy on that. And there are many elements. I will just take one. On the preparedness is, for example, all the anticipation of crisis that you can see, the point number 3. And on the recovery, let's take the last one, supporting civil society and empowering communities. So you see, these are very concrete activities that we are implementing and monitoring, and that allows us to enter in the HDP approach. In terms of best practices on HDP intervention, so I discussed with my colleagues from ACF to prepare this conference and to try to come with key best practices, keeping in mind that we are not a peace actor, indeed. I would say this is a sort of summary of some best practices I would propose you. The first one is when you are going to work in transition, in HDP, in FCV context, addressing the root causes of women and minority exclusion is something essential, especially for NGOs like ACF who work a lot on undernutrition and where the women are a key leverage, of course, to address undernutrition. But if you work in the WASH sector, the women are also absolutely essential about personal health, hygiene, personal health, and childcare. So this is an important one. You can see that we are in the small piece, of course. It's humble, but it's important. The second one is to support the legal approach, essentially through governance. And that means also knowing what is the legal approach in your context, being coherent, of course, with the national legal approach if it's applicable. And of course, you have many tools like the IRC one or like the OECD one that can help you to build a governance approach to the water sector. The third one is about learning about IHL. So every time you're on the HDP approach, you are speaking about law and about peace. And so there are many tools, and we'll come back a little later on that about building our capacity, but there are many tools that will help you to learn about the IHL. It's very difficult to engage in HDP if you're not aware about the international humanitarian law applying to WASH, like the Geneva Conventions applying to WASH, or the Geneva Principle, the 22 Geneva Principle applying to WASH. Then something also a small p, which is pretty humble but essential, is all the integrated water resource management approaches. This is a way to control the small conflicts you can have over the water resource. And I'm referring, for example, to a country like Jordan, where you have a massive issue of drought and where the access to water is critical. Well, in fact, IWRM is a way to stabilize the population against the tensions connected to the access to the basic services and to the resource. So it's a small p, but it should be considered also. And then, of course, you have the issue of neutrality and impartiality, because when you work in conflict areas, well, and even when you work with DPKO or with soldiers, with militaries, etc., well, you are touching the issue of neutrality, and you need to consider that. So it means that it's not neutral to work in a conflict area. You need to be very careful to preserve your own principle, and that's something also. It's an important good practice to keep in mind. Finally, the three other good practices I've been capturing. So one is about using multi-sectorial strategies. Why? Because it's a way of building the resilience of the communities against a conflict. So every time you can get out of your own WASH silo and enter a multi-sectoral approach, you are going to address better the roots of the crisis. Another point which is important for the WASH sector, we have the opportunity to have public-private partnerships, and we believe that bridging the various actors of the civil society is important also to stabilize a community and to foster peace. And finally, there are also recommendations about localization that was also part of the transformative agenda, and also essentially about the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016. And these are also very good practices to stabilize a population. If we look at some case studies of ACF WASH HDP's context, I just will take one in Jordan. So we are working in Azraq. So Azraq, you all know about, I guess there are many people from Jordan around the table, but basically it's a camp of Syrian refugees, nearly 41,000 people, 61% being children. The camp has been there for 12 years. There is a strong focus from ACF on humanitarian WASH, and we are facing financial issues. Let's say we are facing donor fatigue. It's very difficult for a donor after 10 years of crisis to still engage on humanitarian response. The reality is that, there's been a study done by UNHCR a couple of years ago showing that the average length of a camp is 26 years. And so basically, it's not abnormal to have a camp of 12 years. It's a normal thing. But the problem is to engage with humanitarian donors on 12 years is very complex. So the answers we have here, again, very humble answers. The first one is every time you can promote behavior change communication programs, this is a way to secure the peace, even at the level of the camp. Developing multi-sectoral approaches is going to increase social peace. So we are not only focusing on WASH, but we are doing WASH nutrition, health, mental care, and food assistance in the same time for the same people. And of course, having also a contiguum approach, meaning that we are not only working in the camps, but we try to work also more broadly in governorates. So ACF tries to get out of the humanitarian response in order to bridge with the development. And the last point is to do advocacy, and you have here the link. I will share with our the presentation, but there's a link about, for example, an article we produced last year on the camp and on this issue of donors fatigue. So these are some elements, a sort of little case study about what I call long-term transition to peace. Looking at the political, and it's my pretty last slides, but just to know what are the facilitating frameworks. The first, just to remember that peace is one of the 17 SDGs. It's the SDG number 16. So that was defined in 2015. Secondly, the Nexus is one of the 10 Grand Bargain goals. It's the goal number 10. So, and this is in May 2016. Then the Nexus approach has been adopted by the European Union. So there's a sort of institutional frame, especially if you work with European Union actors. And then the Global WASH cluster has embraced it and has used, let's say, the like 5 or 6 goals of the Grand Bargain to translate it into a strategic agenda. And the HDP is one of them. So it has been taken by the Global WASH cluster, and then it has been connected also with the sanitation and water for all building blocks. And then after we have, if we look around ourselves, some other sectors like the health has been also embracing the HDP framework, and they have their own HDP framework. And finally, maybe the more concrete for us is that most of the humanitarian response plan in FCV contexts include HDP in their strategic objectives. Example, I take here Nigeria. So this is the HRP Nigeria 2025. You can see that the strategic objective number 2, which is at country level and multi-sector, obviously, is about working on the protection of people affected by conflict and natural disasters. So you see in most of the HRPs, you are going to find somewhere at national level a strategic objective directly connected to HDP. In terms of funding mechanisms, first, you need to know that from a country to another, and this data are a little old, it's 2017, well, the volume of funding regarding the HDP is extremely variable. So in each of the countries, you are going to have a massive difference between what is allowed for development, for humanitarian, or for peace. This is pretty volatile, but it's important to know that this balance exists and it's very changing from a country to another. So there's not a one-way fit all in terms of funding the HDP Nexus. Secondly, a big recommendation, which is also coming, by the way, from the World Humanitarian Summit, is the flexibility of funds through pool funding. And the pool funding is one of the tools of the humanitarian response plan. So there's a big encouragement to implement the Nexus through pool funding. Why? Because it brings flexibility. We spoke about continuity, we spoke about contiguity. So this is embraced by the pool funding. There is an issue of coherence. You're going to improve the coordination between partners in order to get collective outcome. And also there is a risk management, a financial risk management in pool funding. So this is a big recommendation in terms of funding the HDP Nexus. In terms of capacity building, I would go straight to the point for an NGO like me, Action Against Hunger. Our weakness is about peace. We are working a lot in humanitarian, we are working in development context, but peace is something you need to learn. So you need to learn about the HIL, and you need to learn about the peace processes, and there are excellent organizations. I think about the Geneva Water Hub, I think about the Global Alliance to Spare Water from Armed Conflict, and you have courses online, free, where you can learn on peace. And I would really recommend that as for NGOs who want to enter in HDP. And that's it. So I finished. Sorry, I was just a little long, and I open the floor now for Q&A. I'm going to de-share my screen like this. I can see you.
So thank you so much, Joan, for this insightful presentation, and thank you for sharing, of course, your knowledge about this complex topic, I would say. And maybe just a quick reflection from my side before we proceed to the questions from the audience. I have to say that I appreciated focusing on the peace element because it's usually like overlooked. And this is unfortunate, but this is the way it is. So thank you for focusing on that and for bringing into the discussion the concept of the big P and the small p and the negative peace and positive peace. This is really appreciated. And thank you also for shedding light on how we can like operationalize or implement the HDP in the sense that how to ensure that we have a smooth transition among the different phases, which is is, I would say, quite challenging, and this is quite evident for everyone. So thank you so much. Thank you again, John, for the presentation. And now I'm opening like the floor for the audience if they have any questions or maybe comments, reflections, or they can also, if you wish, you can share with us your insights or your experience. If you have any examples on how, like, where you have implemented the HDP Nexus. So please feel free to unmute your mic and share your questions.
I'm looking in the conversation also if there are some questions, and I will put my my email address there if there is any question coming late, let's say.
Thank you for that. So let me just repeat myself. If you wish, it doesn't need to be a question, maybe reflections, because we also like to hear from you. I can see in the chat that we have different participants coming from different regions in the world. So we would love to hear from you as well. I cannot see from my side any hands raised.
Maybe I can ask a question to the participant. Does this presentation mirrors what you are facing as challenges in the field? For example, the issue of donor fatigue on long-term transition, or for example, the challenge we face about knowing better about peace and about IHL. I guess that there are some mirroring, reflections in the room. Can someone tell us about the problem you're facing in fragile conflict and violent contexts? And I think also we have someone from the regional cluster, as you say, the ARWA. Could be interesting also to have the perception from the coordination, from the region.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I'm like urging the different people joining us to share maybe their reflections or their experience about this. If they are facing any kind of problems, we would love to hear from them. What are these problems or challenges? But anyhow, maybe to kick off the
Okay, I have a
yeah,
request.
please,
I
Asim, I
may,
think. Yeah, please go ahead, please.
yes, it's Asim Nabulsi from Jordan. I'm not an expert or I haven't done anything with HDP Nexus. I'm dealing with some other issues that are relevant. I have been dealing with Wi-Fi Nexus, and I'm dealing a lot with food security and trying to combat hunger. So from that angle, I can have a couple of reflections. One of them, what you're talking about, is very interesting, and we do see the different things and different conflicts. Like definitely not one size fits all. So each one has to be really tailored for the conditions. We definitely see a crunch in the funding. And I'm sorry to say, maybe it sounds a bit cold, but somehow even in conflicts, you have something that are in right now. For example, we have the Syrian refugee crisis. Lots of money was coming in, and all of a sudden, now we have Gaza, we have South Lebanon, what's happening in Syria, and even the catastrophes in Sudan. So somehow the bigger problem have people and donors going towards that direction, and the money flow becomes less and less for others. I'm sorry to say that. It sounds a bit cold. I don't mean it in that manner, but it is the reality. Thank you.
It's very true. You have 75% of Jordan, which is arid, and I think you are the one hosting the fifth largest number of refugees per capita in Jordan. So you have the two levels. I mean, the development, the drought is it's more long-term development issue, and on top of that, you've got the refugees, and you are in the middle of this continuum where you need to face two crises with different paths in the same time. So yeah.
And simultaneously, you don't have enough funding from the government itself, because our financial and fiscal situation is not an excellent one. So it's many sectors within the national context and the economy have competition for the limited funds that are there from the government, and even the crunch in the donor funds are really impacting, you know. But we are always having the discussion of, okay, water is scarce, so who is using it? It used to be 30 years ago, like 75% of water is going to agriculture. Now it's 50%. The urbanization is huge, like 90% of Jordan is urbanized. So the water going for municipal purposes are becoming more and more and more.
Totally.
So, and whatever is going to agriculture already, a big part of what's going to agriculture is recycled water.
So again,
not
I think that
yeah.
for the transition context, the owner is the government. The owner is the development. And this is something a little blur because, at one point you are asking yourself, am I still in humanitarian or am I back in development? Well, after 12 years in Azraq camp, you can question yourself. Or after 20 years in some other camps, you can question yourself. But what is true is that from a technical point of view, the government, the development actors should take care of this transition context. And that's why I call that the peanut, because no one exactly knows, people are more or less clear about humanitarian response and about development agenda, but the transition is a sort of mystery where there are less actors, less donors, and less clarity in terms of role and responsibility. So for this, we have the advocacy. And you have also agencies like UNDP, who are really engaging on this transition context, and that could be a good support also.
Thank you. Any other questions? If we don't have any, I have one question for you, John. So, speaking of the transition and how we can make sure that it's a smooth transition whenever we're talking about the humanitarian going toward development, how would you like for the NGOs, or I would say from an implementation perspective, how would you make sure that the priorities, the different priorities and the different mandates of the humanitarian actors and the development actors are like aligned during the transition? Because we know the mandates are not the same, and also the priorities for the humanitarian actors, I would say maybe life-saving activities, don't go like in line with the development priorities. How would you carry out this kind of transition and also this dialogue between the different actors in order to make this HDP Nexus operational?
So first, I would rely on the coordination. So we have the cluster system or the UN systems that are both coordinating at multi-sector level. So we know that there are 11 potential clusters. And then the coordination is co-facilitated, co-led by the government. So for me, the best interlocutors for your question are the UN because they are connected to the government, and we want to have a transition which is aligned with the government directions, let's say. After, the question comes when the government direction are in opposition with our humanitarian mandate, and this is something different where there may be a need about negotiation and but in the perfect world, let's say, we should rely on the UN coordination mechanism and try to be as coherent as possible with the governmental strategies, if they are acceptable.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much. If we
Pleasure.
don't have any other questions or reflections, I think I have to move to the second presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you, John, once
you.
again.
Pleasure.
So now we have a second presentation from our colleagues from UNICEF. And they will be also sharing from their side insights about the different Nexus initiatives in WASH. And for that, I am inviting Nida and Julia, because they will be the ones presenting. Yeah, I can see the slides. So the floor is all yours. And please feel free to start.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for the invitation to this event. And this is Julia. I'm working with the Middle East and Northern Africa Regional Office of UNICEF with the section for the program, but also I'm in charge of the coordination of the cluster in Syria. So we are facing this Nexus problem every day. Nida will introduce herself.
Hello everyone, Ramadan Kareem. This is Nida Hussein. I'm Motion Climate Change Officer in UNICEF MENA region.
Okay. So thank you for that. We're going to illustrate a little bit from the Nexus from the point of view of UNICEF, and we're going also to present the WASH for Peace initiative. So for our side, I will not go through all that Jean already go on the theoretical part. Thanks, Jean, for that. It was amazing to go through that. I just want to remind everyone that this Nexus initiative doesn't come alone. It was also included, for example, in the WASH roadmap for 2020-25, where we say that we state that the importance for the WASH sector to provide quality and accountable response rooted in preparedness and resilience within the triple Nexus. And inside that, there was also launched the Initiative 7 about the focus on this triple nexus that aimed to provide a global enabling environment. So to create the positive condition for this nexus to happen. We've seen that it's not easy to implement when we are at the country level, and really to have the right condition to have an effective operationalization of the triple nexus. That means from the enabling environment at the donor funding level and the policies as well, and the coordination collaboration among the humanitarian developed actors and as well the Peace One. And it's not easy because the cluster, we are more in charge of the humanitarian actor. Not all the countries have a platform for the development actor to come together. And in some places, the peace is more organized. In some other places, it's not so organized. It depends also on the General Secretariat policy and so on, if they have anything activated country level. What the actors are expected to do is really to reinforce the resilience of the WASH sector and to align the humanitarian development and peace work, and to protect the gains that we got towards the SDG, the 6.1, 6.2 mainly, and to progress towards that, because we can still do something to meet this global objective through the humanitarian and peace intervention. There was also, I really like this one, this document, you can have a look when you have time, is the joint operation framework. So it's more practical way of do this link, especially with the peace part, the conflict sensitivities, peace building, that is for WASH people is a little more new. We're not really expert on that. And the Nexus especially is recommended in the protracted and recurrent crisis in the region. For example, we have Syria, we have Yemen, we have many of them. And so let's see what UNICEF can do in this framework to work towards the Nexus and within the Nexus framework. We have some added value, some strong and weakness. One is good things that we are already working for our mandate in the humanitarian development. So we have a program running on both sides, and we also have the added value to be the cluster lead agency for the WASH cluster So we have also this networking and this role in leading the coordination that can help us. We have the tradition to work technical system with the government and system strengthening, and the UNICEF can also do advocacy high level. So that's something that we can bring to the table. Then we have a lot of challenge in the field, doing the funding, to the capacity of the actor. Sometimes we have also, especially in a very volatile context, so we have external and internal problem. But now I want to go more on the WASH for peace, so I will ask Nida to come in.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Dr. Arwar, for this great opportunity, and thanks for the participants for their commitment. During the coming slide, we will discuss together what's the WASH for Peace initiative, if you've heard about it before, what's UNICEF role on it. We will talk also about the conflict sensitivity and the peace building concept, the challenges that we might face, and what's the potential solution for these challenges. And after that, we will go back to a case study in Syria about peace and conflict project, a successful peace and conflict project inside Syria that's really decreased the amount of sensitivity, conflict sensitivity inside the community. And it was a worship project. But before we start, did you know that around 85,000 children die annually from disease related to unsafe water use? Also, 40,000 children died from conflict. So this is really a big reason why we need to integrate conflict sensitivity and peace building concept into our worship program and into our worship projects. What's the WASH for Peace? Why it's not only like, we can say like worship programming or worship project. WASH for Peace, it's an initiative developed by UNICEF to integrate conflict sensitivity and peace building into worship programming. This initiative equips UNICEF staff, partner, WASH worker, stakeholder with the necessary resources and tools to develop and implement effective WASH intervention, especially in fragile context and conflict-affected context. So, why we need this WASH for Peace? How it will make difference for us? This initiative, or the WASH for Peace, ensure that the WASH programming are designed and implemented in a way that minimize the negative impact of existing tension in X community or X area. Also, in fact, the WASH for Peace is promote the social cohesion. If we have, for example, implementing a water quality project in X community, and this community consists of different groups. So by supporting this different group in this community to manage the water point and monitor this water point, this will help in building a trust and positive relationship inside the community between those groups. So by that, we are promoting the social cohesion in the community. So for the WASH for Peace, it's not only doing the regular WASH services as we are like usually implementing, but also it's addressing peace building goals, which is the long-term peace building goals, which in result will enhance the overall access to the essential WASH services. And when we are talking about the WASH for Peace, we have in mind two concepts: the conflict sensitivity and the peace building. So what's the difference between the conflict sensitivity and the peace building? We can say that conflict sensitivity is a practice, the practice of understanding the interaction between two things. The first thing is the intervention, the WASH intervention itself. And the second thing is the context that we are implementing the WASH program or the intervention on it. So by understanding this interaction or this relationship, we can really minimize the negative impact of the conflict inside the community by the intervention that we managed to design and implement. However, when we start to talk about peace building, it's to do more good. It's the next step of the conflict sensitivity. So peace building, we can say it's the design and implement of worship programming in a way that contribute to long-term peace and sustainability and stability in a conflict area. So as you see in the graph, in any worship programming, we have the conflict sensitivity as a minimum requirement for designing any worship project. However, if we start to contribute to long-term peace and stability goal, we are doing more good. We are doing peace building. We are working on the conflict, not in the conflict. And as a UNICEF, what's our role in that? UNICEF, as all of you know, UNICEF mission is committed to ensure that every child has access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene, even in conflict-affected area. So how we can do that? We can do this by conducting like conflict sensitivity analysis and designing a program that addresses the root cause of this conflict in any community. In fact, UNICEF already developed a guidance and tool to support the entire worship program cycle to ensure that the worship program are designed to be conflict sensitive and contribute to peace building. So we can do more good, not stuck in doing do no harm. We are now doing more good. Part of the challenges that we might face during doing, let's say, peace and conflict project, either in designing or implementing those type of projects, might be the limitation on the capacity for the institute itself. We might need to build the capacity for the WASH worker, the stakeholder in the community itself. And we can also do that by the training, the capacity building program to the related stakeholder for peace and conflict project. Also, we might face limitation on the financial resource, the human resource, the technical resource when doing or designing a when designing a worship program. So to have a solution to solve this, we should have alternative funding resource. We should talk to international donors. We should secure funding from alternative sources. So one of the biggest challenges that we might face during peace and conflict project is the difficulty in coordination between different stakeholders. So we should consider keep like a close coordination and a good partnership between different stakeholders that's working on the WASH intervention. So by that we will have effective WASH intervention. Now we will go to a practical example about a peace and conflict project which was implemented and still ongoing inside Syria. Over to you, Julia.
So when we were preparing this presentation, we were trying to brainstorming what to present as practical example. We went to Syria because it's been in conflict for almost 14 years, and there's a lot of challenge, but also a lot of opportunity for the implementation of the Nexus now. For example, if we think about now in the near future of the return of IDPs to the location or other aspect. But we really went through that, and so we also consult with the Transitional Technical Working Group that is activating, especially for Northwest Syria, and we chose this project this is not the only one, but it's one of the most representative of something that we can do at small scale, but has an impact on the community. So we went to the Northwest Syria, to the Idlib governorate. In Syria, we have more than 14 million people in need of WASH, humanitarian WASH, and most of them are in the northern part. So we went to Idlib because it's one of the places that were host most of IDPs in the country and most of the needs. So this is a project that started as a completely humanitarian project and transformed during his life. So it was a little, it's not a classical Nexus project that sometimes starts as a multi-year project and to really look for the peace and the nexus and the links with the development. But it started like a pure humanitarian project to respond to the outbreak of cholera that started in August 22 and went through inside all the 23. So it's a little different, but it's a good example how we can adapt and change our intervention while implementing that. So in Idlib, there was a dam that was building as an infiltration dam in the 90s to take some rainwater harvesting to refeed the groundwater that's pumping for human and agricultural use. After the start of the conflict, and especially in 2019, Idlib received a lot of IDPs. So Idlib city is around 175,000 people. They receive more than 50,000 IDPs, so more than 30% of the population. And with that, and with growing of the city and the IDPs, the dam was used to store and receive all the untreated wastewater coming from the camp and the community. With the cholera, we try to break the barrier and to put some barrier to break the transmission of the disease. So we decided to do an intervention, so to improve the sewage system. And it was really a very practical sewage system, and it was water treatment plant, construction of that to start as a humanitarian to put the barrier to control the cholera spread. And that was a dimension to cover all the population, IDPs and not. The project benefit that we have until now, I visited the project in January, is still ongoing, so the wastewater treatment plants start to work, and we are on this adjusting phase. But actually what we were able to reduce the contamination local water source, so we achieve on the public health side. We now use the treated wastewater for agricultural irrigation for 88 hectares. So we are really contributing also the food security and the livelihood side. And on the, can you go back? Yeah, sorry. And on the promoting environmental sustainability. On the next step, we need now to go more on the operational maintenance and system strengthening and more on the soft part. But if we go to look at the project, from the three pillar of the Nexus, actually we see that our problem was public health, cholera from humanitarian point of view, because the boreholes were contaminated for human use and the irrigation water was contaminated. So the food basket of Idlib city was full of cholera. So with this technology and with this wastewater treatment plant, we were able to respond to this part. On the same side, we see that just doing the technological and the humanitarian part was not enough because the weak governance system, the governance system was very weak. Imagine that was the problem, the region was run at the time by the de facto authorities. So that was not the government, was de facto authority with some strength and weakness. So we really need to work on that. So we start to work on the wash system strengthening there with the different stakeholders. So the local authorities, at the time the de facto, the farmer association, the water use, the private sector, and to put them together to see what we can do to make this like more sustainable and to work for the next years. So the city, even the camps close and the city is there, they can have this wastewater treatment plant in place. So we are doing on the quality on the laboratory to see the testing. We try to meet the Syrian law standard. And at the same time, we're trying to put inside a tariff system to have some sustainability. And as well, we are working on the training of a technical operational maintenance, the plants and the individual and system level, so the facility. Future opportunity for this more long-term intervention is the integrated water resource management approach, because Syria is a water scarce country, so this is really very useful. And so the reuse of the water for the association of farmers for the long term for the livelihood, and the future human plan, because we are able to absorb on the growing of the city. And we're also talking about the production of biogas, and we have a lot of problem in electricity because damage of the conflict, so also to have some solution to that. Pillar 3 on the peace, there was this high presence of IDPs during the cholera outbreak, was really the source of tension with the hosting community population living in Italy, because say, before you arrive, we don't have this problem with wastewater, so we don't have the cholera come with you in a way. So there was a lot of tension. Now that this system is serving both community and there's a lot of communication on that, it will lower the tension. It's just the first step, but it's a start for the peace part of the project. So that's all from our side, I think. And we are here for any question that you can have, or
Thank you, Julia and Nida, for this inspiring presentation. And thank you for sharing with us like your insights and perspectives. And maybe just like as usual, before we proceed to the questions, I would like to share with you like also like reflections from my side about the points brought to the table by Julia and Nida. So we like John mentioned like earlier about the coordination point, and I think also Julia and Nida brought to the discussion also that we need to look for a joint platform for the development actors. The cluster can maybe bring like together the humanitarian actors, but maybe it's also time to think about joint platforms. I know that there are some platforms, but maybe to have something that a platform that could bring all development actors together and maybe could be centralized. I'm not sure. You mentioned also in your presentation about the joint operational framework, and I would like to let everyone know that this is a topic that will be covered in the second session that is scheduled next Wednesday. So we will be having a presenter or a speaker who will provide us with further details about the joint operational framework. And thank you, Nida, for sharing like this initiative of UNICEF of WASH for Peace, where we have also it's time to start thinking about how to integrate, as you have done in UNICEF, the sensitivity and conflict dynamics in WASH programming. And you mentioned also moving from the do no harm principle to the do more good, right? And this is something that is quite important. So these were like kind of some reflections from my side that I wanted to share with the different participants in this webinar. And now I will open like the floor to the participants if they have any questions, comments, or reflections. I see that yeah, and of course the presentations, for those who wish to have like access to the presentations, we will be sharing that with the participants. If our speakers they don't mind to share it, we will do that definitely afterward, like whenever we're done with the webinar series, it will be shared with the link to the recorded sessions. So I would like to now like ask you if you have any questions that you would like to address to Julia and Nida. John, I see your hand raised. So
yes, thank you, Arwa.
please
I had a question for Julia and Nida. But first, thanks a lot for the presentation. It was also important that you spoke about the WASH roadmap, because indeed the Nexus is one of the initiative, and it's there because it's difficult to reach. So the WASH roadmap is here to build on the most difficult things of the sector. My question was about the WASH for Peace initiative. Could you share a link with us, or to know more about this initiative? Maybe there is a sort of standard platform or web page about the initiative. I could be interested to share it with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, like I will share the platform or the website, where we have the guidance and the needed tool for the WASH for Peace initiative. Thank you.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much, Nida and Julia, for sharing with us the initiative and also providing us access to that. So if we don't have any comments or questions from the participants, I mean, if any question come to your mind, like afterward, you can share it on the chat, and we can forward it to the different speakers, whether to Julia or John. This can also be done, and Nida as well. So I think now I cannot see any raised hands. So to complete like our discussion about the HDP Nexus and to bring into the discussion different perspectives, as I said right at the beginning, I would like to invite our third speaker right now, Hiba from IFRC, who will be also enlightening us about where humanitarian development and peace intersect, and she will be shedding light on the key principles. Hiba is here. Marhaba Hiba, hi. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much for joining. So the floor is all yours. Please, if you can share your screen or your presentation so that we can start.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Oops, Okay. So hello, everyone. My name is Hiba Abu-Rab. I am the Regional WASH Coordinator of IFRC, International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. I'm going to be reflecting on our... I did not know that it flips. I just want to start by introducing IFRC for those who do not know it. IFRC is the largest membership organization. It works together with 16 million volunteers across the globe, and it has 225,000 branches and local units in 191 countries. So we basically work hand in hand with national Red Crosses and Red Crescents around the world. Generally, the national societies have their strength coming from three basic points. The fact that they are working locally with local communities as neutral and independent parties. They work through a highly trained network of volunteers in different aspects, and the auxiliary role of the Red Crescents and Red Crosses have with the local governments and in line with the Geneva Conventions. I want to shed some light on a program that we launched in 2023 that responds to basically water-induced conflicts and instabilities in the world. We are having this program starting 23 that focuses basically on four specific objectives tackling the global peace and security, the sustainable and equitable water management, the mitigation of water-related conflicts, and works around strengthening water cooperation and peace. Here, it's important to mention that similar to all of us, we're not exactly specialized in WASH and peace or water in conflict areas. So we have established strong partnerships with organizations that do have long history of implementation, basically with the Geneva Water Hub and with a global initiative called Water Security and Peace, who are providing us with technical support and capacity building for our local, for our organizations that implement directly with the local communities. Here I'm going to mention a program that we have lately started, starting 24, The program is basically funded by the Korean government, and it operates in 3 countries, Iran, Jordan, and Yemen, over 3 years period, which steps away from, the typical humanitarian short cycle of programming and focuses on building programs that are resilient, that are tackling the water security and peace concepts into every aspect of its program implementation activities. But I'm not going to talk about it today. I'm not going to present the project. I want to take us through this journey of how we see the Nexus implemented. And this diagram here is the typical response timeline that we are all aware of, usually starting, or it's usually triggered by emergency phase that we learn in the books that it's up to 6 months, followed by the transition phase, and later on for post-emergency recovery phase, and looks more into durable solutions. But it's not actually the case, and it's something John has touched upon in terms of actually these phases are intertwined. It's like circles that come together, and we don't have that clear distinction from one phase to the other. So it's important to keep in mind that these phases are not distinct, as I said, and that it's unfortunately not the case most of the time. We've been in emergencies where, like the typical example of water tracking, that we say it starts at the emergency phase up to 6 months, but we end up seeing this activity implemented for like over 10 years in some countries. This is why it's really important that we take into consideration the principles of the HDP Nexus for our programming, for multiple reasons. That the conflicts are no longer, the conflicts are becoming more complex. The nature of the responses are not as 20, 30 years ago, and that we need to also evolve in the way we are programming moving forward. And in my presentation, I'm going to touch upon 7 principles. This is how we see the HDP Nexus. And the first principle is basically around context-specific analysis. This is the analysis, this is the assessment we do at the initial phase of any emergency response. And I'm not going to talk about, the regular WASH assessments because, like checking on available water, available land, soil type. These are given, and these are things we're all aware of as WASH practitioners. But what we usually miss on, especially when we're building upon HDP Nexus concepts, are we considering conflict and peace analysis? Is that needed? Are there any certain social dynamics within the community that we're not paying attention to, that we probably need to investigate and look closely for? And under the application is basically what needs to be considered here is to grow our mindset in terms of checking for climate vulnerabilities. What are the conflict drivers within the community, if they exist? The social dynamics, again. Of course, we need to pay attention to our stakeholders and do proper mapping to be able to identify the power dynamics, any possible triggers. And it all comes as part of this principle number 1 for the analysis in a specific context. The second principle is the integrated planning and programming. And here it's important to acknowledge that we are not working in silos, and that we need to have that long-term development outlook into consideration while we are designing and implementing our programs. Here it's important when it comes to application to consider For example, sustainable water resources management. And I'm going to go back again to the water tracking example. This is generally a life-saving intervention, so it needs to happen for first few months, but it's not only the case. I mean, why not we consider other solutions that are more cost efficient, that are more durable, and can always be repurposed for further uses, even if we say that the emergency was very short term, was well contained and maintained, then the interventions we implement can be always repurposed, and we can end up saving much money when it comes to this intervention. And it is now quite interesting to mention, especially with all this donor fatigue and the funding cuts that we're all observing, that could have been ended up saving money for sustainable longer-term programming down the line. The third principle is the collaborative partnerships. And here we need to make sure that we have strong partnerships with between humanitarian organizations, development organizations, and peace-building agencies, of course, governments, the NGOs, UN, local communities are all part of it. And here comes the importance of coordination, has been also reflected on by my fellow panelists, that coordination comes as an integral part of this overall process. And when it comes to coordination, it's not just that we are in touch for a greater impact. We ensure that information is being shared, that our plans are being shared, and that we actually work together for a meaningful impact. And yeah, as an example of on this collaborative partnership is the pool funding that was also mentioned. I feel that my presentation is somehow summarizing the points from my colleagues. So pool funding is definitely one of the tools we can implement to make sure that our programs, one second, that our programs are implemented to actually achieve impact and to look into building resilient programs down the line. There are several examples where this pool funding was implemented. I can mention the One Wash, for example, from East Africa, which proved to be a very effective approach and can be definitely replicated in other parts of the world. The principle number 4 is basically around conflict sensitivity and do no harm. And do more good, basically, as mentioned by Nida. So doing no harm is basically part of the code of conduct of all of us. We need to make sure that we do not exacerbate existing conflicts and that we are not creating new tensions in communities. And this is quite visible and has been observed in emergency responses, for example, when we only target the certain group of IDPs or refugees without taking into consideration the surrounding host community that do live and have exact same livelihood conditions, which end up in creating lots of frictions between the people that are visiting and the ones that are hosting, and it's not hidden that usually host communities are the ones that are receiving the shock, and they are they are actually considered as the first respondents in every context. When it comes to application, it's important to identify the risks and the mitigation measures. We have to make sure that there is an equitable access to services for everyone, and that there are clear grievance and feedback mechanisms for the interventions we implement. And I'm not identifying these principles as project-based principles, but rather a set of principles that needs to be implemented across the board in any program or intervention we implement in general. When it comes to resilience building, here we're talking more about systems, WASH systems, and working directly with communities to equip them and make them capable of withstanding any shocks and stresses. That goes also to climate change, any conflicts, or economic instability in general. Here we have a growing interest in climate resilient WASH programming in general, where we promote sustainable water resources management practices and basically work on building the capacity of local community to be able to adapt to these rapidly changing norms. And an example here is the Building Back Better concept that I'm sure you're pretty familiar with. And this is stemming from the Sendai Disaster Management Framework that was published in 2015, where it, and this is basically a concept for, I don't know why this, and this is basically a concept that considers generating resilience. And when we talk about Building Back Better, we're talking about three basic concepts: having stronger programs, faster programs that can adapt to to any shocks rapidly, and to make sure that it's more inclusive, especially in fragile contexts. And this concept also builds around the recovery phase and longer-term programming. The following principle number 6, is more into flexible and adaptive programming. And this is especially important when there are lots of uncertainties and where the programs that are being built in fragile contexts or in communities affected by conflicts. Here, it's very important to have robust monitoring and evaluation systems. First, to track the progress, because the situation is very dynamic and is changing sometimes by the minute. So we need to have monitoring and evaluation systems that are adaptive to this changing nature. So we are able of tracking progress. We need to be able to identify challenges and bottlenecks. And then this cycle of continuous monitoring and evaluation would help us in conducting programmatic adjustments that would suit this nature of changing environment and changing context in general. And the last principle would be the long-term vision and sustainability. Here, it's important to prioritize the sustainable solutions, look into longer-term goals that build around peace building, recovery, more development interventions. Applications of this would be, or in this principle, the focus will be mostly on system strengthening. So we need to make sure that we're working with governments or local communities to have systems that are capable of taking over. But it's also around capacity building, making sure that we are equipping our stakeholders with the needed tools and skills to take over and to actually lead on the program, and to have this principle of community ownership for longer term impacts. And lastly, to foster social cohesion and to ensure that no one is left behind. I have a set of pictures here, but I'm gonna stop at this one. I find it really interesting in terms of, so this was basically a water point that was put in an IDP camp. And in our intervention, we did not take into consideration the needs of the community. So we built the water stand, then the community had its own way of tapping into water sources directly, because they are staying there for longer time. As John mentioned, our camps are now, it used to be 17 years, so I was impressed that it's over 20 years now. And then we need to make sure that the needs of people are taken into consideration and that our programming are resilient and longer term. That would be it from my side. Over to you, Arwa.
Thank you so much, Hiba. And I think I would say that it was perfectly scheduled to be like the last presentation without intention. So it fits very well into the program because it was kind of a recap of what has been said in the previous presentations. And also you stressed on key points regarding the key principles that you went through. And I think for me, the principles that you have just mentioned could be like, I would say, is kind of setting up a roadmap for the things that we have to take into consideration whenever we are talking about the like the joint work of humanitarian development and peace actors. So thank you so much for this insightful presentation, Hiba. And I know that the time was quite tight for preparing the presentation. So thank you so much for taking the efforts to get it ready on time. So I'm not sure if anyone from the audience has a question to Hiba or a comment, reflection as usual. Jonia, please go ahead.
It's just a mini comment. Thanks a lot, Hiba. I really appreciated the last slide with this adaptation of the water point by the communities, because we have the same type of adaptation in most of the camps where we stay for more than 10 years. I think it would be really interesting at one point to have a sort of study about how the communities are adapting the water points. If you look, for example, at the toilets in Azraq, they were designed initially as community blocks. And then when you speak with the refugees, they say that culturally it's impossible. And then they switch to, to private latrines in each of the shelter. But of course, it puts a lot of questions about, how to manage with the waste, etc. So as you said, it's very important to understand, to put back the people in the center and to know that when we intervene in camps, it's going to be for 10 to 20 years. So we really need to consider that. So thanks for telling us again this point.
Thank you, John, for sharing with us this comment. And I think one last point from my side, I think that the different communities are adapting based on their needs, but it's unfortunate that till now we are perceiving the camps as transient settlement, which is not true. And just right now, John shared with us like the 10th anniversary of the Azraq camp. So it's unfortunate that we are still looking at these camps as transient settlements. And as you mentioned in your presentation, Hiba, we have to think about sustainability, durable solutions, and so on. And of course, afterward, the community would adapt to the context based on their needs. So thank you so much. Once again, just a check from my side. I'm not sure if anyone wants to share with us any question or a comment. Yes. Sinta. I'm sorry if I'm not spelling the name in the right way. So please feel free to unmute your mic. And yeah. We cannot hear you. The mic is muted. Sinta, we cannot hear you. Your mic is muted, but I can see that your hand is raised. If your mic is not working, maybe you can write down your question in the chat, and I can read it to our speakers. I'm not sure because it seems for me that Sinta is experiencing a technical problem. Okay, in the meantime, as let me repeat what I just said, so you can write your question in the chat, and unless your hand was raised by mistake, I'm not sure. Okay, any other questions or reflections from the audience? Mahmoud, yes, please.
Yes. Good evening for all. Thank you for all speakers for their insight for these topics. Just I want to mention our comment in principle number 2 mentioned by Ruba regarding planning and programming and moving from, let's say, emergency phase to a long-term or semi-long term. I think there is some kind of challenging phasing the implementing any program during this phase. And these challenging are putting the implementation organization or society or any kind of a provider for this program in not moving toward this, let's say, phase from the emergency to long term. Such challenges, the funding challenge, it's the main let's say challenge facing by implementing any program, because as all you know, a long-term intervention need let's say a large capital or a large capital to invest in this phase, such as the example mentioned by Ruba, moving from trucking water. If we want to move from trucking water to, let's say, repair the network to provide the beneficiary for water, or to install a new network, or to let's say find a new water resources in the area, that need a lot of invest to do in that. So I think these challenges are sometimes prevent moving from this emergency, and they were stuck in this stage up to maybe find solution. Although another challenge faced is the capacity of the worker in the field. Maybe sometimes need more building capacity in that side to move toward these phases of program implementation. I just want to add this on what Ruba already mentioned, and I have maybe one question for UNICEF team. When they are implementing their program in Syria for this peace building, what was the reflection of the community and the stakeholders in the field when they are implementing such a project? Thank you for all, and that's from my side.
Thank you, Mahmoud, for your question. I'm not sure if any of our presenters would like to reflect or maybe answer. Yeah, yes, Hiba. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
thank you.
Hiba Mahmoud and not Ruba.
It's هبة. المشكلة إنه بشتغل مع محمود. But I'm familiar with the being named Ruba. For some reason, it seems to be quite easier. No, I just wanted to present this principle number 2, the one mentioned by Mahmoud. It's about integrated planning and programming, and then you mentioned the example from the water tracking. Which is quite understood, of course, when it comes to cost. But this is why it's really important to understand the context and understand the intervention we're talking about. When we talk about, because I've been in such situations where we've been tracking water for it was 10 years back then, and then when we calculated the cost of supplying water through water tracking, it was millions a year. And it would have been definitely much cheaper if we extend the pipe from a nearby water source. Of course, the cost is higher in terms of capital cost for that initial phase, but on the long term, it's definitely much cheaper. And here comes when we have a proper understanding of the context we're talking about. So do we foresee that emergency as a short term, couple of months, and then people will go back to their places? Or is it like in terms of our projections, it's going to be extended for a longer period of time, and thus the planning can take place accordingly. This is basically, of course, it's not applicable in every context. Sometimes it's applicable in a certain situation, but maybe not in others. But the point is to look and consider these options when we start planning and implementation.
Thank you, Hiba, so much. I'm not sure, John, if you want to comment on the financing mechanism, because this is also a point that has been raised by Mahmoud. How to overcome like that problem of cutting in the fund and yeah.
It's not easy. I mean, usually you have a humanitarian response plan, and this humanitarian response plan, I mean, in countries where the clusters are activated, they are opening to a global appeal. The global appeal is usually funded in December. So the HRP is done until November, and then in December you have a global appeal. So in most of the humanitarian response plan, one of the strategic objectives refers to the Nexus, and then it's possible to enter, in the global appeal with some specific projects, like the ones that Hiba was presenting, for example, where you can fit that as project in this country strategic objective. I would say that would be the most coordinated way to do it. And then again, after the question around the HRPs is that they are underfunded. The WASH sector is globally underfunded by 70%. That was a study done in 2023. We took 54 humanitarian response plan and checked what was the level of funding of the WASH sector, and it was about 30%. So in some conflicts like Gaza, you have nearly 50% of funding, which is exceptional. In many other places, you have much less funding. And so that we still have this massive alert about the way of funding the humanitarian response, and the transition is even more difficult to fund. I don't have any answers except for doing advocacy like we do with the WASH roadmap, and sensitizing the donors that the crisis changed. The kinetic of the crisis is not the same one that we had 20 years ago, and now it's hardly below 10 years a crisis. So maybe we need to readapt, the funding mechanisms. Yeah.
Thank you, John, for this elaboration. And I'm not sure, Julia and Nida, if you want to add something from your side about also the financial issue, or even about the capacity, because the capacity building, because I know that UNICEF, they are doing a lot of activities right now in the MENA region in general, like in terms of developing capacities of the locals. So I'm not sure if you want to add anything from your side.
So we can add, maybe I can add a couple of points more from the coordination cluster point of view, and Nida maybe from the program if you want, or I can, yes, okay, you can. So there are two things. As what Sean said, it's also what we do a lot with the cluster. So the WASH coordination, we have a sector and cluster activity in many countries in this region, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, etc. And so in that side, we do a lot of coordination. The part of the coordination is also, we talked before, on the coordination with the development actors. But when we talk about funding, normally the big money, as we say it, is not with the humanitarian side, it's more about the development actors, that because they're more long-term and big-scale projects. So if we really want to, apart from the formal way to mobilize money, to have a more informal way, a lot of coordination is really to build this bridge between the humanitarian and the development, to be sure that also to have access to other opportunity of funding. It can be a recovery trust fund, as was proposed for Syria, or other mechanisms. What is in the advocacy that we do as UNICEF and as cluster is really to humanitarian donors to open the door to do this life-saving response rooted on the on the resilience and towards the Nexus. So to have multi-year funding and some flexibility on that. That's why in some countries the HDP humanitarian response plan is now multi-year, because if a 3 years response plan, you can have some donor going to fund a 2 years or 3 years long humanitarian project that can open really the door to the Nexus to development. And in some countries, we did that in Democratic Republic of Congo, for example. We did that also in Niger, some of the African countries where maybe for the Nexus is more advanced because it started before. And we did have the cluster and the development WASH actors and donors. We usually have a joint task force. So when Hiba said about the planning, the programming, and so on, so there was some representation from the cluster side, multi-sectoral, from the cluster side, from the development actors, especially the big one, like World Bank and so on. So when they're doing their planning, where we're doing our planning, we're trying to influence both planning and also open the door to more funding, because this was you present a long-term view starting from the humanitarian up to the development. That was good. And about the capacity, UNICEF is working a lot on the system strengthening. So we try to, the sectoral system strengthening, so the WASH sector, and we try to do that at country level, but also local level. So work with the national and local authorities to understand which are the bottleneck for the WASH sector to deliver what they are supposed to deliver to the population from the more transition Nexus and development point of view, but so to support them with the capacity building that can be on the technical side, but on the management, on the regulation, on the law, on the policy. So it's more like this system to have an enabling system to be sure that the WASH action can be implemented. But also on the humanitarian side, we just did that in Syria with the facto authorities. We try also to work on this system strengthening as inside the Nexus framework and the capacity building on the stakeholder that actually running the system today, especially, for example, when we start in Idlib, the facto authorities and local municipality were running the system. It's not, they're not linked to any national authorities. So we really go to the service provision level and do the mapping on the different stakeholder, private sector, municipality, NGOs, and so on, to see how we can build the capacity and be sure that the system is working, even without put humanitarian money and service delivery inside. So to have something more sustainable on the long term, and something that you can do. Sometimes we don't have a official authority. You can work on more under the facto authority with all the safeguarding measure, because some of them can be blacklisted on everything. But yes, it's a way to build this bridge. And capacity building, we also have some training that is from the authorities, but also from the other side, to be sure that our UNICEF staff, but also the WASH partner, have the capacity to implement everything. We are doing some WASH emergency training, but also NIDA is preparing the WASH for Peace, if you want to.
Yes, like the WASH for Peace initiative, we did one training last year. It was specifically for the UNICEF staff to build their capacity on this new initiative, let's say. And for this year and the coming years, it's already in our, let's say, capacity building plan to include the WASH for Peace, WASH in emergency, this kind of topic as a capacity building training.
Yes. I hope we addressed the question.
Thank you, Julia and Nida, for providing us with this kind of overview of what UNICEF is doing for the time being, and how you can support like this the implementation of this HDP Nexus from different angles, I would say. So whether financial, or even capacity building and so on. So I see that I think John, you want to intervene?
Yes, it's a brief reflection about capacity building, and Arwa, you know that very well because you're coordinating with Mr. Munjid, a WASH humanitarian master in German Jordan University. Today we are struggling on WASH capacity building, and I say that because I know that there are some people from GIZ, for example, like Teresa in the room. I'm just back from Burkina Faso, where we are running also for 17 years WASH Humanitarian Master for the Waka region. Those masters have been developed with the regional clusters, but the funding of student allowance is nearly impossible now because the World Bank is more focused on bac plus 3 license examen, etc. But for the masters, it's extremely difficult to get funding. So we speak about building the capacity of the sector, but we know that when you have to cut something in a proposal, usually it's the capacity building side, and that more globally, to find a fund for humanitarian masters is extremely challenging. So I don't know what is the position, for example, Teresa, maybe if you could say about the GIZ position about that, because it's really, to be very practical, we are struggling on that. We cannot deliver on that. We've got the courses, we've got the partners, we've got the universities, but we don't have the students because a master is going to cost between 5,000 and 10,000 euros for 1 year, and this is impossible to bring from a student from a developing country. So it's an alert on that point.
Thank you, John. Maybe I will take, I'm not sure if we're going to have like a reflection from GIZ, but I can follow up on that because I am in constant communication with our colleagues from the Susanna Secretariat from GIZ, basically. So I can follow up on your question, John. And I see that we have also Hiba, your hand is raised. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hearing my colleagues now, and actually, I think the best way forward, considering the tough times we're going through now, and the general concepts of donor fatigue that we've been mentioning, is to work together. Now is more important than ever, and the concepts of pool funding to achieve impact is becoming more needed at this stage, and for the following years, to put our efforts together, work together around capacity building programs for trainings, but also for program implementation, and to make sure that we come together for an impact, as I said. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hiba. And I like, from my side, I would say that there is a clear call in this session to join forces and maybe to put even heads together to think about how to overcome the challenges that are in place regarding the operationalization of the HDP. So this is I think quite clear for everyone. So I think we are close to the end of this session, and before we wrap up, I think I would like to take this opportunity to thank the German WASH Network, led by the German Toilet Organization, for leading this initiative of organizing this webinar series. I would like also to thank Susanna, and specifically Susanna Secretariat, for managing the whole registration for this webinar, to thank my university, German Jordanian University, for also supporting the capacity building in the different formats that John just mentioned. So we're trying also our best from our side, working with the different organizations to support the capacity development and capacity building activities taking place in the region. So, and I would like also to thank the audience for joining us today in this webinar. And a big thank to our distinguished speakers for allocating time to attend this webinar and to share with us their insights and expertise. Thank you so much, John, Julia, Nida, and Hiba, for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you so much, and I will not keep you so long. Thank you for everyone for joining us.
Thanks